Roll call, please, Denise.
Commissioner James?
Here.
Commissioner Lesson? He's not here right now. Commissioner Rapp? Here. Commissioner Root? Here. Commissioner Tyson?
Here.
Commissioner Hemmings?
Here.
Commissioner Kodo?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Eric will be arriving a few minutes later.
If we could all please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Announcements before we get going with the meeting. First is that today is the last chance to sign up for the Winnetka Parks Foundation's Golf Classic, which is tomorrow morning at the beautiful Winnetka Golf Club. Please visit the foundation website for more information. Please sign up. It's going to be a great event. We're looking forward to seeing everyone at our upcoming fall events, including the family yoga event that we have at Elder Lane this Saturday morning, our family campfire at Crow Island on September 22nd, and the very popular Bike Winnetka and Fall Fest on September 28th. I'm also excited to announce the start of our outreach events will start later this month. Keep an eye out, please, on social media and in your email to learn more about opportunities to provide input. We look forward to that. Are there any requests for changes or additions to the agenda? Cynthia, yeah.
Some guests, and I'm just wondering if it makes sense to possibly move the Crow Island discussion ahead of the presentation that we have out of consideration for their time.
That's fine with me. Does anybody have an issue with that? Do we need to vote on that? Good. Sorry?
You'll approve it.
Fine. May I have a motion to approve the September 12th agenda as amended to move item 5.1 up before item 4.1?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Public comment. This is your opportunity to address the board on any issue. When called upon, please come to the center position in front of the commissioners and stand at the podium. Speak loudly into the microphone, state your name for the record, and speak directly to the board. Based on the public comment policy described in the board policy manual and referenced in Public Access Counseling in 2024 PAC 81900, guests may present public comment for no longer than 3 minutes after being recognized. If you prefer to share your comments in writing this evening, you may do so by leaving them with a member of the Park District staff. I see we have a volunteer. Please.
I don't know if I got up here too early. Can you hear me up?
Can you
This is just regarding the Winnetka Caucus. Every year, the Winnetka Caucus develops a survey for all Winnetka citizens to share their input on our taxing bodies. Using the results of the survey, we develop platforms and find fellow citizens willing to run for open taxing body positions and support those platforms. The survey ends on September 19th, and we'd encourage everyone to fill it out before then to have their voice heard. If you have not yet received the postcard for the survey or the email, or are just curious about the caucus, you can visit winnetkacaucus.org. That's it. Thanks. Oh, by the way, Steve Julius, 1436 Asbury, Winnetka.
Thanks, Steve. Would anybody else like to speak? Good evening, Ted.
I wasn't going to give my name. Okay, AG's, has never determined whether a name is actually required to give public comments, and given their FOIA decisions, may not be. Hi. So first, I wanted to address I was thinking about this as you were talking about the no applause, no booing. So yeah, I can see it just kind of came to my mind. I can see the maybe no booing being a thing, maybe that's a lack of decorum. But I noticed at these meetings that there's often applause to different agenda items. And so to prohibit that when someone's speaking and giving comments, one might interpret that as a First Amendment violation for free speech, right? If I'm in the audience, why should my free speech rights be infringed if the board applauds for other things? So, not an issue tonight, but maybe at some point in the future I'll start applauding when someone says something, and you know, we can go from there. Okay, the reason I came today was because I saw the whole thing about the audit in the packet, and then I remembered that there were bounced checks on prior financial documents, and then it occurred to me that there is this line item from some time ago where the village, or where the Park District paid $789 for architectural drawings of 261 Sheridan. Why? I mean, it seems like these are financial issues. I've asked in the past, and no one has ever responded, I've asked at least twice, to please tell me what the Park District's official position is on the land swap. Are they going to go through with it? Are they not going to go through with it? Leaving it out there as a thing that might or might not happen when you're talking about spending money to develop land that you might or might not own, and now coupled with expenses being incurred for private property that isn't even the Park District's at this point, seems problematic. So, I'm going to ask again, what is the Park District's position here? Being dormant is not a legal thing. It doesn't mean anything. If you're intending to go forward with it and there is nothing that's going to be done, then you should let people know that it's done deal, we're going to swap it at some point, we're just waiting for Justin Ishbia to get his best possible deal out of it and, you know, somehow prevent people from getting to his property, you know, by putting a fence up that he can't. And, you know, just be straightforward about it. If you're not going to go through with it, then we should stop spending money on 261 Sheridan because there's no point, and you should let people know that the deal is dead, not dormant. And if Justin Ishbia wants to sue the Park District, then he can, and of course that will make him even more endeared in the community. I just think that the fact that you guys are doing this and not doing it with clear, defined positions on these issues is a real problem. And perhaps that explains why you guys can't, you know, submit the audit documents in time. I don't know.
Thank you, Ted. Would anybody else like to speak? Mary?
Good evening. On May 13th, 2004, the Ethics Code was unanimously approved by the Winnetka Park District Board. Ordinance addressed two specific ethical issues for the district employees and elected officials. Number one was improper political activities, and number two was the receipt of improper gifts. It was required by statute to pass the ordinance, and it passed in a limited scope to the language of the new statute. I'm confused as to your intentions this evening. If it is your intent to expand the oversight of the Ethics Committee by committee that is appointed by the Winnetka Park District President, then I recommend that you think about this action. Winnetka local government bodies are not elected where uncompensated volunteers, board members, are subject to the threat of imprisonment and imposition of high fines. Look at the ethics policy in surrounding park districts before imposing more regulation that could be used improperly. I most often watch the village meetings on YouTube. As the Winnetka Park District President spoke last evening to the Village Council, I noticed frustration. I noticed frustration from the Village Board President also. The Winnetka Park District is in a huge rush regarding the Elder Centennial proposed project. This project is extremely expensive for the taxpayers, extremely controversial with the public, and is changing the focus of Centennial Park, not for the better. Does Elder Park and Beach need upgrading? Yes. Elder Park Beach and the facility that has been shut down to the public for 5 years needs to be repaired, upgraded, and opened. Centennial does not need the huge boulders that stop passage on the beach at the north end of Elder and the south of Centennial. The boulders that are perpendicular to the beach are not in line with the approved 2030 plan. The protection for the beach and bluff was proposed as the headland system for beach bluff protection. The best protection for the beach and the bluff should consist of small islands of stone parallel to the beach. Taxpayer and borrowed money is funding this huge and expensive project. Acceptance of a side donation from a private citizen with a 50-year restriction on Centennial Park is our citizen-owned property is absolutely outrageous. The donation that is proposed to be accepted needs to not be accepted if the taxpayers are funding this project and there's no grant money from the state that has even been requested. Then do not accept a donation from the private citizen. Stop, slow your proposal project down at Centennial and stop the frustration occurring for many citizens and the volunteers who serve our community.
Please wrap up your comments, your time is
This
up.
project, as presented, is not in keeping with the history of Winnetka and not in keeping with the Indian word Winnetka, which means beautiful land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Would anybody else like to speak? Okay, seeing none, thanks. That will close public comment. We'll move now to item 5.1, Crow Island Restoration. Shannon, please.
Absolutely. So I'll make a quick statement before I turn it over to Costa to give us a little bit of a timeline of what has occurred with this particular issue. So when it comes to Crow Island Woods, we have an IGA with the Village of Winnetka for the stormwater conveyance project. Back in March, we relooked at that IGA to add a laydown area that was requested by the village to hold their construction equipment and turnaround area. It was our understanding as the Park District that that area, as well as the conveyance, would be relayed back to the Park District in a condition with clean soil that was free from contaminants and safe for the public's use. When we were given back the property, or right before it was closed up and finished, we did notice a great amount of debris, including glass, ceramics, some metal items in the surface that we felt was unsafe for public's use. So we reached out to the village to work on a rectification of that situation, to which they provided us a memo that is attached to your packet in regards to what that potential solution is. We feel that that solution is not particularly adequate for what we are expecting and what the community expects of that site. And also, we have been in conversation with District 36 in regards to similar concerns that they have had with that project as well. And I would say that I know we have representatives from the school district here. If President Waters or Dr. Tess, if you would like to say any words, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you, and again, sorry about my sporting outfit this evening. Yeah, I would say, and I spoke, we had a facility subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, weeks ago, where we had discussion on the same topic and spoke at the village council as well. We are facing the same issue with the berm that runs parallel to Mount Pleasant on the property, where we are seeing significant amount of glass, particularly, and I think that's probably the most concerning, is the glass and the porcelain. As I noted to the council, this is not sea glass. This is sharp glass, and it is pervasive throughout the berm. So what I asked for them is a more comprehensive solution. I think similar to what we had talked about, but also indicated that we were working together to identify someone who could confirm that that solution will be durable We did not, I think in the same stance as you, did not feel that that sod on top was going to be anything other than truly a Band-Aid on top of the situation, and that we would have at some point in the spring or in the fall have glass permeating through. So we have since fenced that area off, and that was closed as of this morning, and continuing to work on an action plan. I've spoken with Crow Island PTO president this morning to give her the update on where we were at, and hoping obviously for quick resolution on that. But it is certainly I think a significant issue that we need to address, and address very thoroughly.
The only thing I would add is just kind of looking at your timeline here. So we requested several times to have the plan that we were proposed over the phone to come to us in writing. So you received a memo on August 21st. We've yet to receive anything in writing. So I think that's just an important difference in your experience versus ours.
Thank you, Dr. Chess. Costa, if you could go through with us kind of a timeline to give our board and the public an idea of what the process has been throughout this in us trying to find a result for this.
Sure. So as Shannon kind of noted earlier, we walked through and discussed the additional exhibits to the original Crow Island IGA. Those two exhibits, Exhibit 3 and 4, were approved at the April 25th, 2024 Park Board meeting. Since then, soil was completed and soil placement by the contractor in its entirety on June 20th. The first section in the southeast corner, which was adjacent to the school property, that was completed approximately on June 13th. And at that point, staff walked the site and noticed the amount of debris that was still left within the top layer of topsoil that was placed for final grading. That time, the staff did bring that to the village staff's attention through the construction sequencing and projects. Then we talked through at a construction meeting a way to try to help mitigate or try to remove that compactor, the glass within that topsoil layer. On June 18th, Greg Fields and myself went out there with a piece of our equipment along with the contractor to see if there was a way to try to clean that and sift it through. Unfortunately, our efforts it didn't work due to the compaction of the soil and the conditions. At that point, the site was finally reviewed and discussed again at the June 20th construction meeting held by the village with staff. At that time, we talked through some different options of what could be done. Contractor in village mentioned some different ways to mitigate or to try to address this issue with additional equipment. They have a piece of equipment called Rockhound, which they've already used previously. The concern was that due to the compaction, they would have to till or disc the area, and in turn that could bring more of the contaminants to the top surface. So at that point, the village staff requested the Park District to submit what we would like to be or what we would like as far as a course of action on how to address that. We discussed that internally as a staff. We sent an email with a proposed remediation plan for the site on July 1st. That email was received on July 1st by the village with a following email from James Bernal, the village, the Director of Engineering for the Village of Winnetka. And then we had circled back again with a revision after additional conversations among staff to find out where things were progressing on that front, as we were notified by the village due to the timing of the project and where we were at with the hottest time of the month. The efforts to try and seed the area with watering could be very difficult, and that efforts to complete this task would be done mid-September. Following that, in our email from the July 24th response, or submission to the village, we did receive a response back from the village that they received that. They had some questions in regards to our review and asked to discuss. So Jim and I had a phone call, and then barring that phone call, there was discussions to move this to a higher level. In this case, have the village staff, along with their trustees, or in this case, the village president and village manager, along with Strand and James Bernal, meet with Park District staff, Christina Cotto, Shannon Rizal, and myself to review ways to try to address this issue. That meeting took place on August 12th. That was held in the morning. Based on that discussion and the meeting review, there were discussions around a memorandum that would be put together by the village. That memorandum is the one that is included in the packet this evening. That memorandum was sent following that meeting on August 21st is when we received that, before our discussion with the park board at the August 22nd meeting. From the 22nd meeting, staff was given direction to move in certain fronts, and staff has moved on those fronts since. We do have some proposals to further discussion in regards to what was asked upon staff with the third-party firms, and that's where we're at to date. I'm not sure as far as the next steps, Shannon, if you'd like to kind of discuss.
Of course. So at this point, we are prepared to move forward with a third-party consultant to look at what remedy is most appropriate for this situation. So we are reliant on a firm chosen by us, the Park District, rather than a firm chosen by the village to have our side of the story told, and we're ready to move forward with that. So we will be working on getting that procured. We're able to pay for that within our current budget. I want to say that it was $6,500, so it's within our purview to be able to get that completed and get that going, so we can get an answer on that. And then from there, any questions? Oh, and we're also, we worked with the school district on some fencing options so we can make sure that our side is also fenced appropriately. So we're also working through that as well. We're a couple days behind the school district, so we don't have that up yet, but that is also something that we're working on. So happy to answer any questions or any discussion from the board.
I think there's also some additional partnering with the schools regarding the consultant and the remedy, because they have a very similar situation, correct?
We've provided, or have we provided yet to Adam?
We provided the consultants that sent us back proposals, so if they choose to move forward and want to contact those consulting firms, they've had the ability to. But there wasn't discussion as far as sharing the cost or the scope at this point. But that's something that can be discussed and we can review, but we just want to make sure both parties knew what we were looking at as we proceed.
Well, I think it's good that we're sharing information. It's unfortunate we have the same situation, but I'm optimistic that we can participate together in a solution.
Costa, could you just take a minute and review the photos of the conditions? Because I think it's important for the public to know and understand, what the conditions of the soil in the park were. And then I know that we have the boring studies that cover some, parts of the berm. And I just think that's good baseline information to have available for everyone.
Yes. Might be 1 second.
While we're hunting for photos, may I ask a question about the discipline of the proposed consultants? Do I understand these are environmental experts?
Costa, you can give us a little more information on the consultants we
Sure. As requested, we did look to the one consulting firm that helped prepare the IGA. Unfortunately, that firm wasn't willing to take on the scope of work. So in addition, we looked at different firms, both civil engineering firms, because we had thought that this could be done within a civil engineering marketplace, if you will. And we've also looked at both environmental and geotechnical. The two proposals that we have back, one is for a geotechnical consulting firm, and the other one is a larger firm. Well, they're both large firms that does both, both firms do geotechnical and environmental consulting. The discipline who submitted the proposal that Shannon had suggested earlier for the $6,500 was the geotechnical services from the one firm to review that. So unfortunately, out of the 5 or 6, we had 5 or 6 people that were not comfortable taking on this project, and we have 2 that one sent us a formal proposal, and the other one is finishing up their proposal, and we should be receiving it soon. The second firm was larger, more expensive than the first, but both had the skill sets and the ability to tackle this this scope for us. So does that help answer your question?
And will provide a written recommendation.
Correct. They will come on site, they will review, they will do some soil exploration and see the contaminants that are on site with several test holes, come back with a third-party review, in this case their review, on how to proceed with the intended use of this being recreational programmed fields. So the end use is for recreational programming, whether it be soccer, kids that play, just walking through the grass barefoot, that kind of play. So.
Thank you.
Cynthia, as seen on the screen for your comments, we had an opportunity, the park staff went out and pulled a soil sample right adjacent to the construction area. This is the construction fencing that was the laydown yard that is directly east of the park pavilion. This sample was pulled just north of that fence line as shown here. As you can see through the soil sample that was pulled, approximately 16 inches deep. There was a good amount of clean black dirt. You start to see a mixed level where more silty sand with some clay beyond 16 inches, but the first 16 inches was pretty clean black fill. As you move on, you can kind of see the site and what that looked like in some different perspectives. Here you can see some images from August 8th that were taken. These are just images in the laydown yard or the fenced off area that was affected by the restoration efforts of this project. The red circles here are indicating glass that is shown in those areas. I will note that this exploration and these photographs that were taken was after a pretty robust attempt to clean the area. So that's one thing to note, that this wasn't just as the site was left. This was after several attempts by the contractor to try to remove and mitigate the concern. Here you'll see more different types of glass, as mentioned before, some ceramics as well as glass, broken bottles and so forth. Once again, just kind of scrolling through here, some of the concerns. And then due to the settling of the project site, there is some grading that needs to be addressed as well. That would be addressed through the final grading and completion. These areas are just backfilled areas that have settled out. But once again, the root cause and concern that we have in front of us today is the debris that was found within the area. If you do walk the site, it's pretty well vegetated now. A lot of weeds and grass has kind of grown in naturally, but if you look down, you can find it throughout. Cynthia, you had mentioned as well some soil samples that were taken previously and indicated. There was a couple different tests that were done. There was one, I believe it was back in 2019, which the initial soil borings that were completed by SECO. Those soil borings were done to find out the integrity and the structural strength of the soil conditions to allow for the storm trap and the installation of these materials for the stormwater plans. And then later on, there were additional borings taken. I believe, if I remember correctly, there was some material found in some of the boring locations. I don't believe those were on the Park District property. I think they were more on the school district property, but I'm one up in the race, so I apologize. But I know you had indicated about the soil films as well. So, any other questions or?
Yeah, Commissioner James has some comments, but before that, just for the record, Commissioner Lesson is now present.
Thank you. Forgive me, I'm pretty upset about this. It really bothers me. I was in the IGA negotiations that consisted of myself, Chris Rentz, Andy Cripe, and Nick Archambault. One of the major sticking points during the IGA discussions was our knowledge of the fill material that had been placed decades earlier under Crow Island. We expressed this was a very difficult discussion, told them if you uncover this debris, you need to be responsible for it. Thus, there is an indemnification provision, insurance indemnification provision written into the intergovernmental agreement. The limits of the disturbed area did not include the play area immediately east of the Crow Island shelter. I was shocked when I was walking my dogs this spring to see that it was fenced in and work was being undertaken. When I discussed it with Costa, the board or the staff acknowledged that there was a provision to bring the final plans to the board for its approval. I recognize the efficacy of collaborating with the village and acknowledged that the need for a lay-down turnaround area was necessary and appropriate. Again, reminded staff of our concerns regarding the contaminated materials that we knew underlie that area. Upon review of the soil borings from 2019, there were no borings in the area east of the Crow Island shelter because that wasn't contemplated. None of the drawings showed that area being included. Nonetheless, in an effort to go along and get along, we agreed it would be okay to use that as long as it would be properly restored. I received word from Costa Catullus on July 31st of the broken glass. Immediately responded with a memorandum, and I will follow it up with correspondence 8-3, 8-13, 8-18, 8-20, and subsequent to that. 90 days has elapsed since this condition was first described, or first discovered. It wasn't one instance, it was two. First with the burn, then with the area in the Crow Island woods. As I've said in writing, there isn't a village engineer within 1,000 miles that would permit this fill to be placed by a private contractor. There would have been a stop work order issued immediately. There needs to be a thorough investigation and an explanation for how and why this happened. The village is capable and competent of inspecting its own work. It should have immediately stopped this. I've been a developer for 37 years. I've probably moved more dirt looking around than anybody else in this room, and probably a lot more than anybody else on the village board. This is basic blocking and tackling. First thing you do with the job is you determine what the soil conditions are. You do so with soil borings, and you do it with test pits. You get an excavator out there, you dig a hole, a big hole, so you can see exactly what you got, which is exactly what Costa did after the fact. You determine how much respread you need, and then you carefully strip and stockpile clean topsoil for the purpose of respread. We had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of cubic yards of topsoil from the golf course, perfectly suited for this, had there been foresight. The village was notified not once in the RGA, but the second time in the spring. It failed to properly segregate the materials. I was out there frequently. I live nearby. I'm very interested in construction. I watched it. It's a tight site. The contractor was excavating. They were casting as far as it could. It was picked up by another excavator, cast it again, and cast it a third time into the truck. That's a thorough mixing job. From my observation, there was no effort to segregate clean from contaminated topsoil. So there are a lot of explanation to do. The right thing to do already passed. That was remove and replace immediately. stop work, don't compound the error. At this point, yes, the material needs to be removed as to what thickness and whether or not there's a soil separator to be placed before placing clean topsoil, but this is a big black eye. It's very unfortunate. I think the village has significant explanation, and both for the oversight and then the subsequent decision making. This is literally an attempted cover-up, and I would like to suggest there's only one of two options. Either you're prioritizing money over safety, or you didn't have the subject matter expertise to recognize that this was an unsafe act.
Thanks, Warren. Any other comments, questions, discussion points for the Crow Island Woods restoration discussion? Commissioner Root.
I am sure that once we have adequate report, that this matter, we can work collaboratively with the village. I think, it is very disappointing, and I'm very pleased that we're moving ahead to secure that report. But I also think that it is incumbent upon all of us as intergovernmental units that we work collaboratively and in a productive, not hostile fashion. So it appears that the village has much going on right now, perhaps too much. And I cannot but assume that once the material and information is provided, that there will be an amicable resolution. So cover up, perhaps not the best choice of words. Warren, I don't blame you for being upset. I walked it, I looked at it, and thought, no, you can't put kids out here, can't do it. But I'm sure that we can come to a peaceful and amicable resolution. I'm very confident of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Root. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you for joining. We'll move along to the next item on the agenda, which is the ethics ordinance review. Shannon, take it away.
All right, taking it away. All right, I'll make sure this. Okay, so Council Adam and Simon and I will kind of tag team this topic. So this is basically just a review of the ethics ordinance. Former Commissioner Garrison might have made this presentation for us a little bit already with some of the background that she gave, but this was originally created in 2004 on a very limited scope based on state statute. So again, this ordinance, which is 484, governs ethical behavior within the Winnetka Park District and enforces standards specifically on political activities and the solicitation and acceptance of gifts, and ensures that conduct aligns with the Illinois State Officials and Employees Ethics Act.
Just in case you weren't around when this act was passed, like many things in Illinois, it happens like the sausage factory. Things get thrown in up until the very last second. The bill was written originally for state officers and employees, and at the 11th hour, someone said, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We're going to add a paragraph that says local governments have to adopt rules that are no less strict than apply to us, and provided no further direction. So what the result of that was is that we have these model ordinances that many local governments adopted that adopted the substantive rules related to political activities and the gift ban. In your case, the board adopted Ordinance 484, which satisfied the requirements of the law.
So the ordinance as it is written is basically carbon copy of what was provided as sample by the Attorney General's office, I believe, for local jurisdictions to be able to use to be responsive to this state law. So some key terms in there, I won't go through them specifically, but as stated before, it's very limited in the scope. So there are some specific definitions that are covered that specify what the prohibited activities are, what the prohibited sources are within the ordinance.
Yeah, the key thing to recognize here with political activities is that the type of political activities that are prohibited are partisan activities that are meant to be persuasive, where you're trying to persuade a member of the public to vote for an official or vote one way on a referendum. This is read together with provisions of the election code, which allow public bodies to disseminate facts about referendum campaigns. So as long as the conduct that the Park District is engaged in is factual and is not partisan in nature, it doesn't violate the spirit of this law. Yeah.
Of course, of course.
I just wanted a little bit more clarification on what is considered partisan, because, you know, here in Winnetka, as you know, we have the caucus, which is nonpartisan. In some years, it has, you know, registered with the Illinois State Board of Elections as a political party, but in most years, it doesn't. And so I'm just curious for a little bit more information on how these rules apply to the caucus activities. So, for example, can petitions to be on a ballot that are unopposed be circulated at the farmer's market? You know, maybe like a good test case, you know, what involvement should we be having in surveying the public on things? Because I was, you know, there was a lot of gray. I know previously we had received the, you know, electioneering advice from you last year during the village election. So I think a little bit more specific, tangible, you know, direction on what's okay and what's not okay would probably be helpful for commissioners.
So I'll give you a today example, a very timely one. So in conversation with the caucus council, so we have been working together with them on, so they asked us as far as input on some of the questions that were on the survey. Which I'm sure that they asked other members of other boards for their questions as well.
The nature of which were like fact checking to make
Right.
sure that the grounds to support behind the question were relevant and reliable.
Right, or can we have this, you know, can you provide us this document or something like that to give more insight on something? So we would provide that document or make sure that the information is accurate from a fact point of view. And then looking at it from early in the process when the information came out to for them collecting nominations for slating and that sort of thing, they asked if we could share that information. It's like, well, it's a factual, we're not saying one way or the other, or we're just sharing something on social media that, hey, if you know somebody or whichever, then here's your opportunity to have somebody, you know, apply. And then in another example, we were asked to share the survey. From that perspective, because there are specifics in that survey that we weren't a part of, so whether it's the schools or the libraries or something along those lines, that there may be a perception of something going one way or another where it may be partisan or it may not be partisan, but there's just that gray area there. That's something we want to stay away from. So with that said, what I offered, and I'm glad they were able to do it, as I offered, was like, well, you can make public comments, let people know about the survey. So it was from that perspective that we're trying to stay away, especially as staff, trying to stay away from that gray political area to where some things that are completely factual, there's no way that it can be construed one way or the other, is on one hand, but something that has even a slight perception, we really want to stay away from. Does that make sense?
What about petitions with the farmers?
So, well, let me back up to something you said. I want to distinguish a party, political party, from a political action committee. A political action committee is any organized group of people that is, the purpose for organizing is to persuade someone to vote for a candidate or vote one way on a referendum. And if you spend or receive in kind services of at least $5,000, you're required to register as a political action committee. That is separate from a political party. Political parties can only run candidates in some types of elections. Municipalities, most municipalities that are more than 40 years old have partisan elections where you're allowed to have people run under a political party banner or on a slate. Park districts, school districts are nonpartisan elections. That means you can't run with a political party. However, taking action with the intent to persuade someone to vote for a candidate for a park district office is a partisan political activity because it's persuasive. It is meant to argue in favor or against a candidate or proposition on a ballot. So the word partisan is used in a number of different ways in the election context, and it doesn't mean the same thing in all circumstances. In terms of the elected officials acting individually retain your First Amendment rights to engage in political conduct. And so circulating nominating petitions to run for office at the farmer's market is different than circulating nominating petitions in the context of a meeting room during a meeting. Because we're conducting park district business here. And this is a park district activity. Whereas farmer's market is a community gathering place where you're likely to find a lot of people eligible to vote and sign your petition. It's like standing out in front of the grocery store.
Just to clarify, we host a booth, the Winnetka Park District hosts a booth with our banner, Winnetka Park District, and we're promoting Park District things. Obviously, we're all volunteers. So is there a gray area there? Because we have a Park District booth, Park District property.
If you wanted to solicit signatures for a nominating petition, my recommendation would be to walk away from the booth.
I think the key is to remove the appearance that the activity is associated with the park district. That's what I think is the ultimate advice. So I think if you'd like to circulate petitions or act in your own First Amendment, on your own First Amendment rights, do so, of course, but not under the guise of the park district or the appearance that it's with respect to the park district business. While we're on prohibited political activities, one of the main purposes of the law is to prevent public employees from being pressured to engage in political activities as a condition of employment or to avoid punishment during employment, to avoid adverse employment action. They didn't want state office holders to engage in the Old Boys Network, where they promoted people who campaigned for them and went door to door during business hours, during the time they were getting paid by the government. That's really one of the key purposes of the law.
I just want to clarify that at the farmer's market, it's acceptable to promote positions that are majority positions of the board.
It is acceptable to, well, first of all, discussing park district business is not discussing a proposition on the ballot. It's not campaigning for an officer. You can report to the community the positions the board has taken on issues the board has taken a position on. whether it's through a policy statement or an ordinance or some other vote, it's an oral recitation of minutes. I don't view that as being a political activity because it doesn't have to do with a campaign for public office or a referendum issue.
Do you have any, is there any gray area around explaining our Centennial and Alder beach projects?
I don't think so.
The next item, to go into a little bit about the gift ban portion of that, it's in regards to officers, employees, and their families, in regards to accepting those gifts from prohibited sources, and then also gives the exceptions of, so if it's your birthday and your significant other is giving you a present, then that's not considered, banned for this ordinance. So that's just putting that into perspective for that, but it's more along the lines if someone is trying to get an individual to go a certain way on an item with a gift or something like that. So that's what that's kind of going towards.
Yeah, unlike the political activities set prohibition where there isn't really a cure baked into the statute, with gift ban, there is a way to self-report and cure the violation. If you happen to receive a gift that exceeds the limits in the law or doesn't fit into one of the exceptions, you can either return the gift or donate the cash value of the gift to a charitable enterprise. In those circumstances, it's important to keep accurate records, contemporaneous records, and keep receipts, and make sure that it would be advisable to share that with the board secretary, so there's a contemporaneous record of what happened, and if there's some questions after the fact, we can go back to that and show that it was kept track of contemporaneously and it's not an after the fact rationalization.
So while going through the ordinance, noticed that we are supposed to be appointing an ethics commission, and which is something we do not currently have, but it is part of the ordinance to appoint a 3-member commission to oversee violations that are specifically related to the items in the ordinance, which are prohibited political activities and the gift ban. Those are the only items that the Ethics Commission would have purview over, to have that oversight, investigation, conducting hearings, and recommending penalties. And they ensure compliance and hears those cases of misconduct on just those 2 items only. Do you have anything else on that one?
The commission's organized so that there's procedure in place for the public to file complaints in a confidential way so that the Ethics Commission can do a thorough investigation and report on their findings. There's a difference between social media's conjecture and actually filing a complaint with the Ethics Commission. And the only thing that triggers an investigation and, report is actually filing a complaint with the Ethics Commission. Simply posting conjecture and rumor on social media doesn't result in any formal activity by the Ethics Commission or the Park District. At least with respect to these 2 areas of the law.
Right. And as Adam mentioned earlier, that there are penalties for violations in certain areas, and those are determined through the ordinance by way of the state law. So these are not items that are randomly were added into the ordinance. These are based on state law for those two items, the prohibited political activities and gift ban. It also indicates that false reports of violations are also punishable.
Commissioner Coto, do you have a comment or question?
At some point, I just wanted to explain that because we don't have an ethics commission, when we were going through this, that's why we're revisiting this. So we need to direct staff to survey other park districts and understand how they choose those commission members, because they cannot be part of this committee. Who else? Usually the attorney and staff members serve on that ethics commission, but we don't have one, and it's clearly outlined in the ordinance. So that's why we're revisiting this. There you go.
I had a couple questions that weren't addressed on this slide. One, the ordinance also indicated that we should have an ethics advisor. And I had understood the ordinance to say that you chose 3 people among the people sitting around these tables. So,
Say that again?
that you chose 3 commissioners to be your ethics board.
Who chose?
When I read the ordinance, that is how I understood it, not that you have 3 outside people.
So the way that I read the ordinance, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, is while it says commissioners, it's talking about ethics commission commissioners, not park board commissioners. That's the designation, because it also restricts specifically that they can't be related to by whichever degree of people that are on the park board, employees or officers. So that would also include myself as an officer, as the board secretary, that I would not be eligible to, say, be on the ethics commission because I am an officer of the board.
So just for comparison, I mean, I looked at the parallel village ordinances, and they have the village manager identified as the ethics advisor, and then the trustees as the commission, I thought. So, I mean, this statute has been on the books since, what, 2004? It applies to all park districts, all schools, all villages. So
from
I'm a little bit puzzled by that and why it's urgent for us to be dealing with it. I think it should be kind of settled, because it's been on the books for 20 years. We were using a boilerplate.
We don't have the commission. We don't have anyone appointed to the commission. That's what we're trying to address. We're trying to introduce to you the idea about what the ethics ordinance says, because we don't want to bring it out of nowhere, and then help you understand that because we don't have 3 members appointed to the ethics commission, it would break down the process that's supposed to be in place to receive and review and adjudicate these complaints. So we need to appoint 3 people to the ethics commission.
The fact that we haven't had an ethics commission for 20 years doesn't mean that we should actually abide by the statute now. The statute says in section 20.1 that no person shall be appointed as a member of the commission who is related either by blood or marriage up to the degree of first cousin to any elected officer of the Winnetka Park District, which removes everybody that's in this room that's been elected, and their spouses and anybody else that's related to them up to the first cousin relation. So I think we need to visit this aspect of the ethics ordinance, and I think part of the conversation today should be how do we get to the point where we decide how a commission gets appointed.
So a couple other things, as we mentioned, that the current ethics ordinance only applies to 2 different topics. There are other items that are not included in the ethics ordinance that normally may be something that could be addressed as an ethics concern, and that could be conflict of interest, similar to the Public Officers Prohibited Activities Act. which deals a lot with contracts, conflicts with, purchasing contracts, that sort of thing. Our park board policy manual, code of ethics. There is nothing in the code of ethics that has any reporting mechanism for those issues, and other items directed by the state, such as FOIA or OMA, other than our Open Meetings Act and Freedom of Information Act, for other to come to specifically the park board for complaint, other than what the state law gives the option to do, which would be to report directly to the state's attorney's office. And yes, Commissioner Root.
I might ask a question. Seeing that I had the distinction of being the only Illinois Park Commissioner ever to be censured, I want to make very sure here that if we are talking about an ethics committee, we are talking about an ethics committee that is handling unauthorized political activities or is handling unauthorized gifting. If we are even headed where we are going to have 3 people where citizens can bring in complaints alleging other activities, I think we need to make that very clear right now. Because that's what I wondered, if this is where this was headed. Because what I foresee is, depending on what issues are before this district, and depending upon what the mix of the board is, this could become a very, almost like a police state situation, where there could be allegations that are not factually based. And so I guess I need to understand, is this what we're going to ask our ethics committee, whoever and however is selected, to also address? Or are we limiting it to Ordinance 484? That's what I need to understand.
Yeah, my understanding is that's what we're talking about.
Limiting to 484?
We're talking about whether it ought to be limited to.
Oh, okay.
Right, so, I think that's part of the conversation. And while we're looking at the ethics ordinance, particularly with respect to the commission, we might as well revisit the thing and make sure that we have it the way we want it. And I think that's an open conversation, personally. I understand exactly what you're saying. We ought to have clear definition of what this commission is supposed to have purview over.
Are we exploring also, as we expand this definition and the purview of the Ethics Commission, that they will have the ability also to seek jail time and criminal penalties?
So number one, nobody has said that we're seeking to expand anything, Commissioner. What we said is we're here to have a discussion about whether or not it ought to be expanded. Secondly, a commission appointed by a president of the Park District, as you know, as an attorney, cannot go seek jail time. That is an absolutely ridiculous statement. If we'd like to have a conversation about whether or not we want to expand the purview of the ethics ordinance, I suggest we have it. That's why we're having this conversation. We can choose not to. I have reservations about doing that. Okay? But we have to have the conversation. Right? Nobody's here talking about expansion. We're talking about whether we have a conversation towards expansion, and if we expand, what that expansion ought to look like.
Thank you for that clarification. It's somewhat disappointing that we hadn't had the discussion on April 25th, when this board felt very free to really attack, without notice, an individual commissioner. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm a bit sensitive about this. And yes, I understand that there are constitutional limits of what a district can do about imprisoning a volunteer elected commissioner. The reason I had the extreme statement was I want everyone to think about this. And so thank you.
Commissioner James.
I respect your comments. I think they're very thoughtful, and we ought to think long and hard about it. I want to go a little bit deeper and ask Adam. So we have a caucus system, and that is not an elected body. And yet, it seems that the slating of candidates is a very important aspect of actually being elected. So where do you draw the line?
So it's important to recognize that the caucus that operates in the village is not recognized in any statute in Illinois. It is an ad hoc, volunteer organization that, in my own words, is designed to take the pulse of the community and find candidates willing to support the pulse of the community. It's a screening mechanism. Even if you're slated by the caucus, that doesn't qualify you to go on the ballot. You're still required to satisfy the obligations everyone else is required to go through to get on the ballot, like nominating petitions, to have enough signatures, file your statement of candidacy, file a receipt for your statement of economic interest. So the caucus is partisan insofar as they do make recommendations for who should run and who should win races for office in the community. So it is a partisan organization insofar as it is acting in a persuasive way. That doesn't make it a political party, but it's still acting in a manner that is designed to persuade members of the community to vote for the people that are endorsed by the caucus.
Does that make it a PAC?
It doesn't necessarily make it a PAC, or it could be a PAC, but it doesn't have to register unless it meets that spending threshold.
But they do advocate, the caucus does then advocate for its slated candidates, puts out yard signs and stuff like that.
Right.
I would, personally welcome additional explanation. Not tonight, but, maybe come back and give us further guidance.
I have familiarity with the caucus, not necessarily the Winnicott caucus, but there are caucuses like this in a lot of North Shore communities. I'm a member of a caucus in the community where I live. It takes a lot to spend $5,000. So,
We're all okay.
there are lots of times individual candidates who run as an independent candidate for office who buy postcards and send them out in Class 4 mail, and they spend $300. They don't have to register as a PAC. They don't have to be friends of candidate A. That doesn't mean that they aren't engaging in the same types of activities that a political action committee does, but they're not required to register or file quarterly reports.
That's all I got.
I feel like we addressed my question about the ethics advisor. I feel like that's much more immediately actionable for us from this ordinance and something that I have actually seen other park districts do. The other question that I have is for Adam. How many of your clients actually have this commission established? Because I've not read anything in the thousands of pages at this point of park district minutes of other park districts, IAPD things that specifically call this out as, here's how we did it, here's what you did. Like, how many of your clients have it?
I want to go back to the original statement we had at the beginning of the presentation. The ordinance adopted by the Park District was based on a model issued by the Attorney General. And even before that, I said that the state law was put together like sausage, and the requirements for local governments were added at the last minute. And so, because the statute's written in a way that says local governments have to adopt rules that are no less strict than apply to state officers, the Attorney General recommended that because there's a legislative ethics commission for state legislative officers and there's an executive ethics commission for the executive branch of state government, that they would recommend a parallel ethics commission for local governments so that it mirrored what happened at the state level. This is based on the recommendation of the Attorney General. There are no reported cases on the requirement per se to have a local ethics commission, but it is designed to mimic the format that was put in place for the state officers and employees.
Is there a number of clients that you have?
There probably are, I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Is there
I have, honestly, because this is from 2004,
So
I don't know if I've looked at this ordinance again in the last 10 years.
If I could, so as I go through this ordinance, so this is an ordinance that has already been enacted by the Park District. So currently, it is a requirement of the Park District, regardless if we haven't done it yet. It's a requirement per an ordinance that we have unless we change that ordinance, which is absolutely an option. But as the ordinance is written right now, we are supposed to have an ethics commission of 3 ethics commissioners to oversee these 2 items. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that is what the Park District put in place in 2004. What I can say from my experience, again, my experience isn't mostly from Illinois, but I have been a part of agencies that have had ethics commissions that were made up of residents of that community that were either applied or were nominated to sit on this ethics commission. However many members it was, there was a member of staff that was the administrative person for that ethics commission, and then also an attorney sat as legal counsel for that ethics commission as well. There are lots of ways to go about it, but it's not something that I've not had experience with. I have had experience with having this in a Parks and Recreation agency. I have not polled park districts in our area at this point, as we were just going through hey, this is what we have on paper right now. So I haven't polled anybody to ask if they have an active ethics commission or anything like that at this point, but that is absolutely something that I can.
Can I just, first of all, I think it's a good idea to poll. I think everybody would like to know that. Secondly, I've got to leave here and I apologize, but I have just a quick question, Adam. Is a commission required under the state law?
There are local governments that have adopted ordinances that don't include commissions.
Not my question, ma'am. My question is whether or not the state law requires that there be an ethics commission.
It does not say that in black and white.
Doesn't answer my question either. Right? Because as we know, right, laws get interpreted, right? So I don't care whether it says it in black and white. Does the state law require an ethics commission?
That might be an Attorney General question.
We should ask that question too, by the way. If we're going to talk about all this stuff, we should find out the answer.
I agree. Can I highlight what I heard you say and what I heard you say? The ordinance that we have adopted requires an ethics commission. So we can amend our ordinance and not develop one, which is fine too.
That's why I asked the
We
question.
can also poll other park districts to see how they do it. And I think that would be valuable. Both of those pieces of information would be valuable.
I want to answer your question this way. We wrote ordinances in response to this law for our clients that did not include commissions.
Okay. That's helpful. Okay, good.
I don't know what the number is, but I can tell you that definitively.
Thank you very much.
Just going back yet again to the ethics advisor, that seems like a very actionable first step that we have not yet taken from this ordinance.
It can't be done tonight.
No. The acknowledgement that that is a reasonable first step might be good.
Okay, so it sounds like we're just, sorry, go ahead.
And just one other comment. in looking at some of the IAPD standard language, suggested language, they also talk about the ethics officer submitting advisory opinions so that commissioners or I guess employees could actually ask for an advisory opinion about something to see if the conduct was okay or not okay.
Sure.
And I think that would be a really good first step and should be something also to consider, because if you need someone to go to where you can ask a question.
That's identified in the ordinance you have already. The ethics advisors, it includes in their role.
Right,
providing
right,
guidance.
okay.
No, we don't.
But we don't have one.
Well, there's a difference between a vacancy in office and what they're allowed to do. So once there's someone there, it is specifically within their purview to offer advisory opinions.
Yeah, okay. So I think you're
We're all saying the same thing.
understanding why I sort of brought this forward. We either need to change the ordinance, and we probably need to understand why we're deciding away from or towards the commission, correct? So if staff would help us with that, that would be.
We can absolutely, so if I understand correctly, that we will poll park districts to see what they do in regards to this. Any other suggestions for other information that you need that we can bring back on the 26th?
I feel like the 26th is a little bit premature.
It's too urgent for this, yeah. Take till the following.
Okay.
And I would also suggest, since this covers school districts, libraries, villages, that perhaps also benchmarking what other entities in our own community are doing or have done or how they've implemented it might be a good framework for us to be consistent for our resident voters.
So just to summarize, possibility to change the ordinance, information needed regarding how many people have an ethics commission, how do they appoint those people, and who could be our ethics advisor if in fact we decide to go forward with that. Does that, anybody else want to add any other research points?
Just one other question. We've talked about ordinance 484, but we also have the prohibited activities statute.
Yeah.
So could we maybe consider having the ethics advisor also helping us with the prohibited activities? So we cover.
You can, but you have to add it explicitly.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, but if we're gonna do this, why wouldn't we do that? So,
That's not my decision.
well, no, it's a rhetorical question.
Yeah, so
There are
let's look for examples.
There are examples that IAPD has put out in regards to items in their policy manual, not ordinances per se, but in their policy manual, that talks about that particular act in regards to conflicts with contracts and that sort of thing, and how they handle those, which is why I also brought up our code of ethics as something that we don't have a way to do anything with that, other than it's there.
Got it. Okay, so the follow-up for that is going to be in October.
Okay.
We've already dealt with Croyland Woods, Elder and Centennial Beach and Park projects, Park and Beach projects. Closer?
Christina, thank you. Few things to note per the memorandum and where things are at with the project to date. We had a meeting scheduled with the village for September 24th to have the first review of the Zoning Board of Appeals on the project. That meeting, staff was notified by village staff that that meeting was canceled, and that meeting is now rescheduled for October 14th, which coincides as the regular meeting for October, which was the next available meeting. So please note that. We had that as a change in the packet, and that was the change that we had received earlier this week, Tuesday morning, in review, and just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that change. We're reluctant to suggest future dates for other meetings at this time because of this change and not knowing when those would be scheduled based on the review of the village staff and the next steps forward. But please note, as soon as we have that information available, we will be sharing that, not only with the park board, but the general public, as we continue to move forward.
Can I clarify?
Thanks, Costa.
Who's reluctant to schedule meetings? We, the park district, or we, the village?
When I said reluctant, and that was the park district to identify the future meetings of those dates of when they could be, because what we've seen thus far, we have been incorrect. And I noted that with the Gantt chart when I initially had included the meetings per the request of the board, and here we are, essentially 3 months later, and we've now had to change our meeting date yet again. So the reluctancy is of staff to identify those future dates, because with the unknown of when that would pass, because we cannot run meetings simultaneously, they have to be run congruent. As one completes, the next one will be noticed
And when was that determination made?
That was information that we received from the village approximately about a month ago now, during the last review and discussion.
Just to clarify, we submitted our permit in April, but we learned in August that they wanted us to do it sequentially instead of serially.
That is correct.
I mean, instead of parallel.
Yes. With that note, we are looking to submit the special use permit early next week. Monday is our goal for the Elder Lane project. So hopefully, with what we've learned through the Centennial project, Elder's project should be a quicker review in regards to less back and forth based on what we learned, and hopefully will allow those projects to kind of catch up to one another, allowing for the potential bidding and construction phase to coincide with both projects happening simultaneously. So that's just one other thing to note.
That's the 17th, right?
I'm sorry?
17th, Monday the 17th.
Monday's the 16th?
16th, okay,
Yes.
perfect. Just wanted to.
Our goal is to have that submitted. I'm sure there'll be at least one review with comments, but once we have that, we should be able to solidify that and have that to your own really quick.
Well, I'll reserve.
Okay. Okay.
I have comments, but
Okay.
I'll reserve.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else, Costa?
The other thing I would like to note that's included in the packet, well, there's two things. One, now that we have completed final construction documents for Elder, their cost range for the project from 100% to the final documents was an adjustment increase of $385. So right now, the cost estimate for the construction of the project, which includes a 10% contingency, is $7,828,006.05. So I'd just like to note that's our current our budget, our engineering estimate based off the completed construction project plans. Please note that those plans to date is missing the storm pipe or the stormwater connection from the parkland to the beach. Anything due west of the steel, the existing steel shoreline is not included with that plan set. We're waiting on the village to finalize or work through with their consultants, their review of that and their study. And I believe, Shannon, if there was any insight from the September 10th meeting earlier this week from the study session, maybe you can give greater insight on how that's progressing.
So from the study session that I attended on Tuesday, the village went through a portion of their start of the East Winnetka Stormwater Plan with Strand. They gave a short presentation that focused on the Elder Lane section of the stormwater plan. So it's very beginning, very just some concepts at this point, but we were able to see in that presentation that Strand did recommend that our proposed pipe size of 60 inches would be adequate for Elder Lane. Also with relocating the storm outfall to the north side of the park as we have also proposed.
Any other comments? Any comments? Warren? Okay.
You You thought I'd be away for a month and not have comments on Elder and Centennial?
Okay, we'll keep it short, because Eric has to leave at 8. That's my only request.
The community has spoken, spoke through the caucus last year. There's a great sense of urgency to open Elder and open or reopen and improve Centennial. I think there, speaking of intergovernmental cooperation, there needs to be greater cooperation to advance these permit applications. We've been asking for well over a year to define the permit process. The village expanded, to be clear, the village in January of 23 conducted a study session. It was very useful. In March, they extended their zoning authority into Lake Michigan and imposed certain broad general themes: minimize height, maximize views. That was part of the March zoning ordinance. The Park District approved its plans May 25th, 2023, and the village proposed 4 ordinances on June 30th, 2023 for consideration July 6th, only 5 days later. They passed those 4 ordinances, including a 9-month abeyance period. So the Park District had to respond by altering its plans to comport with the amended village ordinances. It did so by October, approving a revised set of plans that addressed the changes necessitated by the village ordinances. But the village denied our ability to submit for permit application until after the abeyance period. Only after the abeyance period expired in April, late March, we filed our application for permit for Centennial on April 3rd. We were still waiting on pipe size information for Elder to proceed with the Elder plans. After we filed for our permits, the village suggested, why don't we just do an IGA negotiation in lieu of the full permit process, which could have been undertaken in July of 2023 had we known. But this board determined that because there was such a desire for full transparency, that we would go through the full permit process. So we've had our applications in since April 2023. And it was only until a month ago that the village advised us that they wanted to process our permit applications in serial fashion. The first being the Zoning Board of Appeals, which deals broadly with variances to the zoning ordinance. This is not something for which you need detailed plans or specific construction plans. In fact, none of these advisory committees need specific detailed 100% construction drawings, yet the questions that we were being asked through the review process were very detailed construction. Now, I understand that people want to understand or recognize or appreciate the details of these plans, but we have 100% construction documents ready to go so that we can advance this plan and respond to the wishes of the community and move forward with improvements to both Elder and Centennial. I would ask that the village and its elected officials and its advisory committees would also act with dispatch to hear our permit applications, process this, and let's proceed so that we can then get into the IDNR and Army Corps permit process, which is a whole separate ordeal. If we don't move quickly, if we can't get through this process, we will be foreclosed from actually performing construction in 2025, and that would be a travesty. So I would ask the village and all of the elected and volunteer officials to let's work together to consider this permit application. We have 100% construction documents ready to go. Let's move.
Thank you. 4 minutes, very nice. Very succinct, nice timeline, that's very helpful. Anyone else have any comments regarding Elder Centennial? Okay. We're going to move on to new business, item number 6. Declaring a board vacancy.
Okay, so if I could, I'm probably going to talk a little bit about 6.1 and 6.2 concurrently because they are very much related. So what I would say in regards to declaring a board vacancy, the ordinance discussion, that is in regards to, if we get back to another ordinance, that we were able to find, so ordinance 505, we assume it was adopted sometime between 2007 and 2008. We have not been able to locate a meeting where it was actually adopted. There is a meeting that has 504, there is a meeting that has 506, but the dates in between do not have a 505 adoption of this ordinance. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad ordinance or it's incorrect or anything like that. We just wanted to make sure, as it was talked about in the policy manual, as per 4.12 in the policy manual specifically talks about ordinance 505. We wanted to make sure that we had appropriate adoptions, approvals of this particular topic to make sure that everything was on the up and up and that it is an actual approved, adopted ordinance. With that, in speaking with council and not being able to even find that meeting, because what we have done with some other ordinances where we weren't able to find a signature, we were able to look at those meeting minutes and put those approved, or those meeting minutes that showed approval with those ordinances to show that that ordinance was approved. Unfortunately, we were not able to find a meeting that matched up with this particular ordinance in regards to vacancies. So with that, the ordinance that we have are looking to potentially at the next meeting, because we can't vote on anything here, so this is the conversation of what potentially we could bring back for adoption in the future, has a repeal and reinstatement, assuming that it may have been approved, but we're not really sure, it's not much different than what we were looking at previously. It just has a repealer clause and looks at some specifics in regards to having some things that were having notice of a hearing given by the president. It's given by the secretary of the board, since that's more of an administrative item, so that's something that we would take care of as well. And then just fixing up some items that cleaned it up a little bit. So you should be able to see within the draft of there what was added and deleted on that particular item. And this is something that we would potentially bring back end of the month to the regular meeting if the board feels appropriate to do so.
I'm happy to take any discussion items regarding declaring a vacancy.
It is exciting to point out that we are rolling out a new ordinance numerology system
That makes more
to make it
sense.
easier to find out when ordinances were adopted. Instead of numbering them all sequentially since the beginning of time, you'll notice that this proposed ordinance is ordinance 2024-005.
There you go. Cynthia, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had a lot of comments on this change.
In regards to the ordinance or the policy manual?
I'd say both.
Okay.
Because obviously the ordinance refers to this. I mean, the policy manual refers to this, correct? So obviously, I think it's incorrect in the recitals to say we adopted the ordinance if we don't have a record of adoption. I have a question that I'll put out there so people can think about, but why is this the most pressing policy issue right now? I mean, like, our policy manual is, not updated in many cases since 2019. we have successfully processed resignations from the board with replacements. I noted that this policy is not current with the current OMA statute, and we have not addressed that in our policy, so I'm wondering why that is not addressed with the same urgency as this. I think we need a clause that it will apply prospectively, just so that that's clear. And I felt that this repeated failure to attend board meetings, when you combine 2 consecutive calendar months with you have to be there, when the meeting is adjourned, or when the meeting is convened to when it's adjourned, is problematic. And I think tonight is an amazing example of why that is problematic, because we are a volunteer board and people have lives, and I have not perceived an attendance issue at all with our board. I feel like people on this board have been very diligent about attending and participating, and that just seemed crazy. On review of comparative policies in the IPD, best practices of policies, this was like very restrictive compared to those. And so I think that that should be addressed. And I think that it would be probably beneficial, should we be seriously considering this, that staff should analyze our actual attendance of actual members of this board since May of 23, when this board was slated, to see if we'd have anyone left after implementing the policy as defined in this document. Because I think that there's a real concern that we might not achieve a quorum and that we would just be filling the board with our friends, because it wouldn't be time when someone got kicked off with the electoral process. So there we are.
Does anyone else have comments?
Let me make sure I've covered all mine.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I've gotten them all on the table.
Okay. I just wanted to say 2 words about the motivation. We have had replacements and the processes for replacing candidates, and that's really the focus of this. It's not declaring a vacancy or firing a board member or anything like that. It's really to have in place a policy that we all agree on, that's all current, because we replaced Colleen Knupp with you, and we replaced John Peterson with David Seaman in 2 very different ways. And so we do have some people who have indicated that they are thinking about resigning at various points. And consequently, I wanted to have a policy in place that we all agreed on, that was freshly aired, so that we, before slating, before elections, before anything else, so that we had a good understanding for ourselves of how we wanted to go forward if we had a resignation. That's all. I hope that helps. I would like to reiterate Commissioner Rapp's comments, and I think as we look at this, 2 consecutive meetings is very harsh. I think
That's what was in the old ordinance.
I know,
correct?
I know, but
Okay.
it just times.
Yeah, so we can absolutely amend those. I'm much less concerned with kicking someone off. I'm much more concerned with having a process we all agree on for replacing someone.
And I agree with you on that. And again, if someone comes in 10 minutes late to a meeting,
Doesn't, yeah.
and like James, if they have to leave mid-meeting, yeah. We're a volunteer board, we need flexibility.
Anything else?
So I went over the ordinance. Is there anything further in specifics to the policy manual side of it? So what it was previously was very short and sweet, but it also talked about ordinance 505, which is what we're trying to fix. And so basically we took that information out and said that we would follow basically state law and an ordinance that we would be recreating, for lack of a better word, and also discusses what Commissioner Cotto mentioned in regards to looking at a succinct process for replacement, if that were to come about.
Shannon? Just real quickly, the reason that there's a difference, the reason that there's two things presented to you, this ordinance separately from the policy, is because in the Park District Code, it says that that the attendance requirement, for lack of a better term, has to be set by ordinance, or it's not enforceable. Whereas the policy describing the process for replacing someone is just a policy issue, and that just is appropriate for the policy manual. It doesn't have to be by ordinance, so that's why there are two documents before you.
Just to go back, as Adam has said previously, you cannot look at the policy manual in certain sections in a vacuum, and I think it is very important that we bring our excusable reasons for absences or call-in line with current statute as well at the same time.
Talking about childcare?
Any other comments on the declaring a board vacancy, policy manual or ordinance? Okay. Aaron, oh, you have more? Sorry. No, that's okay.
We can wait until the policy manual part, you want to spread it out.
No, this is the policy manual part. Yeah.
Adam, can you just explain in your own words, in the statute about if the vacancy occurs with less than 28 months versus more than 28 months but less than 123 days?
Sure. Basically, if a vacancy occurs where there's enough time for a candidate to run for the remainder of the unexpired term, then the person who's appointed to fill that vacancy only fills it until the next regular election, at which time that seat is filled for the unexpired portion of that term. Because terms don't follow people, terms follow seats. So, we'll pick on James because he's not here. If he resigned now, but as of today, there's still time for a candidate to run for office in April. So the person who would fill that seat by appointment would only fill it through that appointment until the person is elected and qualified and takes the oath of office.
Can you just clarify, because James's term does not end with this current election, his ends in the next cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So
the appointment would be until the board, which is sworn in after the April election, is impaneled. And then someone would run for a 2-year unexpired term.
okay.
On the other hand, let's say James decided to resign in January. That's long after the deadline for filing nominating petitions. So if James resigned in January, the person to fill that vacancy by appointment would fill it for 2 years and 3 months.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah,
clear?
thank you.
Mhm.
I didn't know there was an option to run for a 2-year unexpired term, but that explains it.
Absolutely. If you were having trouble sleeping, you can go back. You can go back and look at the election results on the Cook County Board of Election Commissioners for each odd-numbered cycle, and there's always unexpired terms that people run for.
I feel like our park board is a little bit unusual with the 7 commissioners with the 4 terms, and a lot of them have the 5 commissioners with the 6-year terms, so, yeah.
There's lots of permutations, but yeah.
Anything else?
Just to give a little bit more specific guidance on what I thought was reasonable, if you're like 4 consecutive months of needing to leave early or missing meetings, and then, 6 meetings missed in a 12-month period that are regularly scheduled.
I think that's a board option to declare a vacancy. I don't think it's a board requirement to declare a vacancy, correct? That's how I read that. I don't think we're required to declare a vacancy if those attendance requirements are not met. I think it's an option if we want to, if we really feel like someone's not carrying their water. Yeah, so and I don't foresee that happening. Okay. Are we ready to move on? Okay. Committee of the whole meetings.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Are we gonna talk specifically about policy 4.12?
That was just the.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
it
was
was just that portion.
Okay, so I
that
had
we spoke about.
comments on that, just to note that in selection of replacement A, upon acceptance of a resignation, the board shall announce the vacancy, not will. I think the board is obliged to announce the vacancy and not just fill the position. And then nominations, the board shall open a call for nominations, and the board will review all submitted applications and shall conduct interviews with selected candidates. I also had some concerns about a resigning board member may nominate a candidate for their replacement. I think it's really important that we open a call for nominations, and it's not just this person's gone and we've all decided in a back room to fill them with someone who the person going out has recommended. I think that's not necessarily good governance.
I can speak to the will versus shall. That's just my own preference to write in plain English, the way that people talk.
I learned when we were talking about the agenda changes about the difference between may and shall, so I'm concerned that we don't have language strong. I'm sure that I don't feel like this is strong enough to oblige the board to go out and seek a call for nominations.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to be doing is taking in all these comments, going back and forth with Shannon and producing something that will be iterated to all commissioners prior to the 26th meeting. Does that sound like a good path forward for everybody? Okay. Okay. All right. Let's. Are we ready to move on to committee of the whole?
Sure.
Okay. I'm glad. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item, we're on 6.3 of the agenda. So this is basically looking at the potential of removing the requirement of a committee of the whole meeting, still having regular meetings and still having the opportunities for special meetings when needed, in order to look at efficiencies both for the board and for staff, and being able to give the public the opportunity to come to, not have to come to 2 meetings a month if they feel that they need to come to all of the meetings, which I know we do have some very passionate community members that come to our meetings. So looking at everybody's the efficiencies of that, and being able to only at regular meetings anyway, being able to vote on items. So anything that we're talking about right now, it would be something that would go on consent, potentially on the next meeting, or have further discussion at the next meeting. But that's also a possibility with regular meetings, or if an additional special meeting is needed. It doesn't take any of those options away. And what this does is put that in the 2 sections that it is mentioned specifically about time and date in the policy manual, to be able to look at making the committee of the whole meetings either optional at another time, at another frequency or just holding special meetings for specific things that may come up within that process. And I will answer any questions that you may have.
Cynthia? Yes, yeah.
I'll go.
No, this way. Go for it, please. Please go ahead.
Please.
Yeah.
I think we all feel that we have way too many meetings, and, I certainly understand that. However, in kind of looking, I like park history, and in looking back at park history, I saw that in lieu of committee of the whole meetings, what this district did have was, I call them subcommittees, where you had parks and recreation, you had tennis, you had golf, you name it, waterfront, whatever you want to call it. And it was, they would consist of community members and then one or two commissioners that would meet regularly with really the patrons of oftentimes those who use the particular facilities. So I could see how the committee of the whole meeting could go away if we did that. Now, we have in our audience tonight a former president who said, boy, I was going to subcommittee meetings every night of the week, because the president, she felt, and I hope I can speak for you, Mary, that she felt that she should be there. But I'm kind of curious as how we're going to get the budget reviewed, and how our community that's very interested, we have a number of people that patch in and listen. They don't come, but they listen. How are they going to stay up to speed if we are going to reduce ourselves down to one meeting a month? Unless we do have these subcommittees, which I think might be a great idea, because it would bring in the community that uses the facilities to keep you and staff up to date on concerns and problems, just suggestions they have.
Sure.
In the past, when we discussed this, I remember you were not particularly fond of having these. You thought, I believe your words were, that it was rather a waste of staff time. So this is just
I don't recall making a statement about committee meetings being a waste of staff time. But what I would say is that in regards to budget, we still would go through the normal budget process like we would. That would not change. It would more than likely either we keep the dates that we have and it's a special meeting specifically for budget, or that the dates and times are made more appropriate for, or at specific times for the general public, to make sure that they're able to participate in that budgeting process. So we don't plan, and we're going through the budget process now, and that is not a change. There was never a suggestion about reducing the budget process at all. That is not the idea.
I just threw that out as an example.
Yeah, but that is not an idea at all. That has never crossed my mind, and it is not my intention at all to reduce the public's access to the information that we provide the public. I have offered myself up as being very transparent and very open to conversations with individuals from the public. And the public has not been shy to give me their comments on anything.
I'm glad to
I'm
hear
telling
that.
you that. I mean, just from the conversations, I'm at the farmer's market every Saturday. Every Saturday I've been at the farmer's market talking to our residents. And I hear from folks through email, I talk to people over the phone, I have meetings with them. I think I have a set table at Hometown for all the meetings that I have with folks in the community to talk about their concerns and issues. So it is not anybody's intent to reduce the public's access to information. It's to look at the point of our having these double meetings on the same topics most efficient for our use. I do know one of the items when I first came in that was of concern to this board was the amount of time and how long the meetings were. So it was looking at different ways to make those more efficient and move things along. As I'm talking for really long right now. But it's definitely not that intent to reduce the public's access to information.
Please understand, that wasn't my point. My point was, I think tonight has been a committee of the whole meeting where we've had some productive discussion. That can't occur unless we're sitting in a meeting. And what I'm hearing you say is, if I'm correct, well, then we'll just have to schedule committee of the whole meetings when we have these issues, or we will do a special meeting. In the past, when commissioners other than the president have wanted to, and our policy manual to commissioners can ask for a special meeting, there's not been a great deal of cooperation by other members of the board. And so I guess the concern I have is how we get our business done. We communicate with each other outside a meeting, and again, how we keep the public kind of informed with just one meeting a month.
I think if there's any issue where I would propose that if there's any issue where we need a special meeting, we'll call a special meeting. If there are any processes like budgeting, which are multi-meeting processes, obviously that would indicate that you would keep that. But we're moving into a period where both sets of permits will be submitted. And the summer of 2022, we had 78 hours of meetings. I mean, it's hard to recruit people for commissioner positions when they see those numbers, when they see the start times and the end times. It's hard to recruit. Schools has one meeting a month, and they don't meet at all during the summer. I mean, it's a different schedule, it's a different business. But it's hard to recruit people. It's challenging, and I want to be efficient about how we use people's time. Cynthia, I think you have some comments.
Yes, I definitely have some comments. I looked more specifically at the park districts that were referenced as not having committee of the whole, and I would note Northbrook has a committee of the whole sometimes, but they also have administration and finance meetings for a committee, which all commissioners can attend, and they have parks and properties meetings. Those seem to be noticed well in advance, like not 2 days before a special meeting. Glenview has finance, admin, ops, and marketing committee, parks, facility, and environmental committee, rec, swimming, museums, and historical sites committee, special revenue facilities committee. Wilmette has tried different approaches with the individual committees versus committee of the whole. Currently, they've slotted back to committee of the whole. Highland Park also uses the individual committees, facility and recreation committee, finance committee, and lakefront parks and natural areas. So I am very reluctant to get rid of the committee of the whole unless there is a very clearly defined strategy on how we are going to cover the responsibilities of the board. I would know our audit report is late. We previously had an audit and finance committee. We don't have that now. That
is due to the vendor. That has
Yeah.
nothing to do with staff.
That is the auditor.
Okay.
Right? No, I just want it to be completely clear to the public, because when you say something like that, it makes it sound like we're deficient, and we are not.
Okay, I can't wait to read it. We have no advisory meetings. Our policy manual has not been comprehensively updated since 2019. I think that definitely commissioners want to be involved in the comprehensive plan. And as that rolls out, which will probably be a little bit beyond what we cover in our regular meetings, what these other districts do that have the committees is that they go through, like the finance committee goes through the financials in detail at the committee meeting, and then all commissioners are invited, you don't have to attend, and then it's part of the consent agenda for the regular meeting. So that might be a more effective model, so that commissioners who are enthusiastic to attend more meetings on topics that are more interesting to them, and then they can still vote on things at the regular meetings. But I don't think just eliminating the committee of the whole meeting without a plan to actually get the work done of the board that we are behind on, like the policy manual as an example, which we all agreed was important, is a good strategy for us. The other thing that I've noticed other districts doing is that when they don't have committee of the whole meetings, or they regularly have, they normally have committee of the whole meetings. If they don't have anything to discuss, they cancel them after they've already been scheduled. In my knowledge as a board, we have never done that, so that might be another balance. We also go for 4 months without committee of the whole meeting. So I would say that instead of just, no, in January last time, we
Oh,
reduced to one
true,
so that
true.
staff could attend.
First time ever last
IPD.
year, we did not have 2 meetings in January. That was the
So,
first year.
So I just am very uncomfortable with having a situation where, you know, someone has to call a committee meeting, it's then noticed under, or like a special meeting with a very short notice for the public. And so I think that this needs to be a little bit more fully baked on how it's actually rolling out before we just rush to change the policy manual, because I don't feel like we have processes that are working and allowing us to get our work done as a board effectively. And just crossing stuff out, I don't think accomplishes that either.
Okay. Thank you. Eric, Warren, any comments? Okay. Okay, Executive Director's report. You have them in your packet? Oh, Jeff, I didn't invite you to speak. Oh, so sorry, asphalt paving bid. Putting my glasses back on, I apologize.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just going to give a little background on the asphalt paving at 4 of the sites that we've identified. The 4 sites are Upper Tower Road parking lot, Maple Street Beach parking lot to the bluff edge, also a section of the Green Bay Trail, and then up at our service center for parks maintenance, there's our parking lot is in disrepair. So we identified that last year as needing to be replaced. I packaged that together with a bid packet, and that was advertised on August 8th, held open until August 27th, at which time we had a bid opening. We did receive 5 bids for the whole package of all 4 locations. The contractors were A-Lamp, Concrete Contractors, Schroeder Asphalt Services, Murphy Construction Services, Everest Blacktop, and Chicagoland Paving Contractors. 2 of the bids were close. The lowest bid was produced by Murphy Construction Services with a bid total of $129,798. The second lowest bid was Chicagoland Paving Contractors with a very close $129,918, a difference of $120 between the 2 bids. Staff reviewed both of them. I called references on Murphy, did not receive much from that. I did receive many callbacks from Chicagoland Paving. I will note that we've used Chicagoland Paving in the past, and we're very happy with parking lots. I think that one, they did some over here as well. We're very happy with the quality of work. In doing some research also for the scope of type of work between the 2, I saw that Chicagoland worked with a lot of park districts. They provided a much bigger list of references, which aligned with the type of work that we're looking for, and seeing that the 2 bids were so close with a $120 difference, it was staff's recommendation to go with what we know and that fits the scope of work identified by what they provided. The budget that was through a few different accounts. The total budget was $185,000 for all 4 sites. We came in, if selected, for the $129,918, we would be $52,082 below budget for that type of work. So I know that there's not really a decision tonight, but staff recommends the board hear the memo and give direction at the next board meeting. any questions.
It was very thorough, thank you.
Great job.
Yeah, very interesting.
Shannon, just to confirm, this will appear on the consent agenda at our next meeting? Okay, so we don't need to talk about it. Thank you, Greg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Okay, so we're moving to Executive Director's Report. It's all there.
It's all there.
Excellent. Commissioner comments? I'm going to go around the room here. Jeff, do you have any comments?
I think it was already brought up by Commissioner Hemmings. We've got the Winnetka Parks Foundation golf tournament tomorrow. We've got a number of sponsors lined up, and some good money coming in from those sponsors. The other thing I'd like to say is there's still some spots available. So if anybody listening wants to attend, can they still get in via the website, or what's the best way?
Tonight. Last heard, I think we had 3 tee times left. Best thing to do probably would be to go to the foundation website this evening to sign up if you have not yet. We'll be printing the cart cards in the morning.
Perfect. And then,
What time, Jeff?
so the first tee time is 8:30 a.m.
I think the tee times we have left are maybe 9:50 and 10.
Great. One other item, Green Bay Trail volunteer work. A group is getting together again Wednesday next week at 8 a.m. If anybody needs any additional information on how to get involved, you can reach out to me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Warren?
2 comments tonight. Missed the last meeting. There was some discussion of no bathrooms at Centennial Park. Just a little bit of history. There are underground improvements for bathrooms. Bathrooms were approved and are under construction, and when the community objected to bathrooms in Centennial, so that work was ceased. So if you want to take that up, feel free. Centennial Dog Beach fence location. Professor Charles Dowding made a presentation to the village board and submitted a letter to us. I responded to Chuck today and asked that that letter be copied Christina and Shannon, and asked that that letter be circulated to the board and to the public. Specifically, I have great respect for Chuck. We've had wonderful conversations. I think he is a tremendous asset to the community. I would remind Professor Dowding that you got to look at the plan and the profile. If you study the profile, the toe of slope of the groin that was erected by Orchard 2020 is well below the top of the steel. There's only a 30-inch grade difference between the top of the steel and the top of the steps. So there's plenty of room to have 6-foot path. I was out there today. I provided a picture. There's more than 6 feet of sand that is accreted. Speaking of accreted sand, if sand accretes as the result of an artificial improvement by the resident, that sand accretes to the benefit of the public. Ergo, all that land, all that sand north of the Ishpia groin is public by Illinois state statute. Last thing, we placed the fence in its proposed location, attaching it to the existing steel, first because it's a great rigid foundation. Second, because sand constantly moves and there's typically a vertical drop off, especially north or south of that steel piece. So by placing the fence there, you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You provide control for the dogs, and you have fall protection adjacent, and there's plenty of width. So hope that solves that one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Eric?
No comments tonight?
Excellent. Colleen?
Commissioner Cotto and I had the pleasure of listening to State Senators Julie Morrison and Laura Fine at our local chapter league event. Annually, we have what's called Wine and Wine, where we invite our elected officials to come and just kind of tell us what's going on and let our constituents come in and ask questions. During their presentation, I was very pleased to hear that there's over $30 million in the state budget this year for OSLED grants. And so I hope that as we consider our very expensive capital projects, that we also move forward and look at grant opportunities. Thank you.
Cynthia?
Enough, and I know Commissioner Lawson is eager to get going.
I think he's got a pickup. Yeah, he's got a pickup. I have no comments this week, so, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. This meeting stands adjourned at 8:11.